Final Fantasy X just hit its 25th anniversary, which means we've been watching Tidus scream laugh, and yes, I'm going to refer to him as Tidus. I know his name's actually Tidus, but I can't help myself. And we've been crying at that ending and getting absolutely demolished by Yuna for a quarter of a century. And I felt that it deserved something special because this is my favorite game of all time. So I went ahead and built every single party member in D&D, which means that's Tidus, Yuna, Auron, Lulu, Wakka, Rikku, and Kimahri. And what I found is that this is an absolutely ridiculous combination when you build some of these characters that frankly, in some ways, shouldn't work. But with a ton of digging and finding just the right item to replicate a celestial weapon, I made these builds work, and they work together so well that it is one of the most perfectly cohesive D&D parties. So let's go ahead and get started with a game that straight up changed my life in a way that's so significant it may have actually affected my future bloodline of my family. But I'll get into that later. Let's build each character in order of popularity, because Square Enix came out with a giant list of every character in Final Fantasy and how popular they rank. And at the bottom of the list, it's not a huge surprise when it comes to Final Fantasy X, it's Kimahri Ronso, because he comes in at the 87th most popular out of all Final Fantasy characters. When you can choose a species, go with Leonin because it's basically a giant lion man, and that fits Kimahri pretty well. Just throw a broken horn on his head and it's perfect. For a background, go with Guard because he's one of Yuna's OG guardians. And then when it comes to the class, if you've ever played Final Fantasy X, you know that Kimahri is kind of one of the most neglected characters in the entire game because he just kind of winds up not being quite as powerful. But he does fulfill two major classic jobs from the Final Fantasy universe. That's the Dragoon and the Blue Mage. Dragoons are known to jump around, use a big spear or polearm, and Blue Mages are all about stealing your enemy's abilities. So there's actually an easy way to build each one of those things in D&D, but when you combine them, it doesn't usually work. And that's why I had to do a ton of research and find a perfect item to make this build work in a way that usually shouldn't, which we're going to treat as Kimahri's celestial weapon. So to very quickly take care of his Dragoon side, take one level of fighter. This gives you access to all weapons, all armor. It gives you a fighting style, so take interception so you can help protect the party, and that allows you to reduce damage of a nearby party member by 1d10 plus your proficiency bonus as a reaction. And then at first level of fighter, you also get a weapon mastery. You get to choose 3 weapons, so grab tons of polearms and a spear, going with a halberd, which gives you the cleave property, glaive, which gives you the graze property, and a spear, which gives you the sap property. Then we need to immediately jump over to our Blue Mage side. And there's one particular subclass in D&D that can steal enemy abilities. So it's required that you multiclass into Rogue. And this is where the build stops working until we get our special item, because Rogues get an ability called Sneak Attack. And Sneak Attack allows them to boost up their damage a ton, getting an extra 1d6 of damage right away, but an extra 1d6 for every 2 levels of Rogue after that. But there's some requirements to apply Sneak Attack damage. You need to either have advantage or have one of your allies within 5 feet of them, but it only works if you're using a finesse or ranged weapon. And as a Dragoon, you don't have any of those, because polearms don't really work as finesse weapons. And we're not going to go through level by level here because we got a lot of characters to build, so just know that we're going to fix this in a bit. However, moving along, once you can choose a Rogue subclass at level 3 of Rogue, you're going to want to choose Arcane Trickster. This gives us access to plenty of spell casting. While it is more limited than going with something like a wizard, we should be able to get pretty much everything we need. We'll take Rogue all the way to max level. As far as some spells we can choose, we're going to get up to 4th level spells, and there's only one cantrip you actually want, and that's going to be True Strike. It's going to be the only way that you can keep your damage going up as you level up overall, because True Strike is going to boost your damage at 5th, 11th, and 17th level, so at least you can semi-keep up. You also get the jump spells, so you can start getting that Dragoon stuff in early. You can get the semblance of stealing enemy abilities with things like Dragon Breath, which can replicate the Aqua Breath or Fire Breath, or Catapult for something like Seed Cannon. You can use Sickening Radiance for something that feels a bit more like the Bad Breath ability you can get, but I'd round it out with a few more things I'll have on the character sheet, which I always have on Patreon. Now you get a few other things thanks to being an Arcane Trickster, like Magical Ambush, forcing enemies enemies to have disadvantage on a spell, or some tricky stuff you can do with your mage hand, but what we really wanted is the ability to steal enemy abilities, and that comes at the 17th level of being an arcane trickster with spell feat. So you gain the ability to magically steal the knowledge of how to cast a spell from another spellcaster. Immediately after a creature casts a spell that targets you or includes you in its area of effect, you can take a reaction to force that creature to make an intelligence save, and if they fail, you negate the spell's effects against you and you steal the knowledge of the spell. So for the next 8 hours, you have the spell prepared, and your enemy can't use the spell for the same period of time. Now this is slightly more limited, you're not going to be building up a stockpile of abilities, but it's still really cool that you can actually have the blue mage ability. And I also wanted to make sure I incorporated some part of Kimahri's base ability to activate Lancet, siphoning off some health or mana. So at 19th level of Rogue, you grab the epic boon, the boon of the Soul Drinker. This allows you to have resistance to cold and necrotic damage, but it also gives you the ability Siphon Life. So if an enemy within 120 feet of you is reduced to 0 hit points, you can take a reaction to regain 50 hit points. But you can only do that once per short or long rest. Now, the only way this build works and doesn't generally suck, because you're forcing in the more polearm nature of a Dragoon with a rogue, despite trying to keep up the best you can with the True Strike cantrip, is by getting a celestial weapon. And there's one weapon that I had to dig through a ton of the D&D catalog to find, because it comes from the D&D 5th edition book, Princes of the Apocalypse. And there's a legendary spear that will suddenly solve all of our problems, and it's called Wind Vein. This spear has a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls. When you hit with it, it deals an extra 1d6 lightning damage. It gives you air mastery, so you can speak Auron, even though it's not Auron as in the person, it's Auron as in a type of species in D&D. It gives you resistance to lightning damage. You get the Dominate Monster spell, but you can only use it on air elementals. And it's got a feature called Song of the Four Winds, which is very particular to Princes of the Apocalypse. But the most important thing is that this spear is the only polearm style weapon in all of D&D that I could find that also has the finesse property, which means it is the only polearm style weapon that you can now use your sneak attack with. So that means you can have sneak attack while being a Dragoon. And I was very proud of being able to track this one down. And even the image of this weapon surprisingly kind of looks like the celestial weapon in Final Fantasy X. But now it's time to move on to the next character. At the 62nd most popular character in all of Final Fantasy, it's Lulu, your classic black mage. Now Lulu is going to be a typical human. This gives us the versatile feature, which allows us to choose an origin feat right away. We're going to grab Magic Initiate, which is almost obvious because it's Lulu. We need as much spellcasting as possible. But we really just want this so we can immediately get the first level spell Find Familiar, because Lulu's weapon in Final Fantasy is usually a little Moogle or a little type of doll type thing that she's hanging on to, and it can attack for her. So we want the spell Find Familiar. It's a first level spell and it's very easy to get in a lot of ways, but I wanted to make sure I got it right away so you have some access to her normal weapon. Then for a background, go with Acolyte. She is a pretty devout follower of Yevon, the primary religion in Final Fantasy X, in the world of Spira, but this also gives us the Magic Initiate feat. However, it leans into the Cleric spell list. So since she does have kind of motherly advice at times, we're going to grab the cantrip Guidance. To get a little more into her goth nature, grab Toll the Dead, and then follow it up with Shield of Faith. This can be her reflex ability, boosting up your overall defense. Then when it comes to the class, we need to go with a pure spellcaster. Lulu is a black mage, which would often go towards a wizard, but Lulu's overdrive is all about multicasting, and the best way to be able to use that is by going with the sorcerer. That's part of why I wanted to make sure I grabbed that Find Familiar spell, because you don't get access to Find Familiar as a normal sorcerer. But you can get that multicasting ability if you want to, with the meta magic feature that you get from being a sorcerer, because then you can do quicken spells, so you can cast a spell as a bonus action, and then cast a cantrip as your action if you want to. But when it comes to the sorcerer subclass, you want to lean into that goth nature, and like so many others who played this game throughout their adolescence, this really had a major effect on me. So to get a more goth-like sorcerer, go with a Shadow Sorcerer. This subclass got recently updated. It'll give you plenty of new shadowy spells like Bane, Darkness, Inflict Wounds, and it gives you Power of Shadow, so you get Eyes of the Dark, giving you some special dark vision, and Strength of the Grave, so you don't die as easily. But it does give you another way to have your weapons that you would have in Final Fantasy X, aka your little minion puppet thing. And that's because you get the feature Beasts of Ill Omen. So you can spend 3 sorcery points to cast Summon Beast as a bonus action. And you can modify it so it doesn't require concentration. You get a few other features throughout being a Shadow Sorcerer, like Umbral Form, giving you resistance to all damage except for Force and Radiant. And when it comes to actual spells, just grab basically every elemental damaging spell possible, with a couple poison ones in there for the bio spell, and a few force damaging spells for the more Ultima style abilities. But when it comes to an epic boon, grab the boon of Spell Recall. This is one of the few ways that you can actually cast leveled spells more than once in a turn, because thanks to the boon of Spell Recall, if you cast a spell of 1st through 4th level, you can roll a d4, and if whatever you rolled is the same as the level spell that you cast, it becomes a free casting, which means you didn't spend a spell slot on it. And the only requirement in D&D is that you can't use a spell slot to cast a spell more than once per turn. So if this turns it into a free casting and you quicken that spell, that means you have a free leveled spell that you're casting as a bonus action, and you can do it again as your action. And that's a perfect way to utilize her overdrive, even though doing so whenever I played the game absolutely destroyed my palm when I was trying to rotate that joystick so many times. Then it's time to jump over to the 53rd most popular character in Final Fantasy X, and one of the more racist characters, while also just making me think of Futurama and Bender half the time I'm playing as him, because it's Wakka. Now, in order to make sure that Wakka is actually optimized in D&D, he actually has to get over his prejudices, because in general, we're going to go with human, and it will give him the tough feat. Just because he's fairly tanky, you wind up playing with him a lot if you use him properly in Final Fantasy X. And tough gives you an extra 2 hit points of health per level of your overall build. And he's ultra religious, so we'll give him the background Acolyte. This comes with a Magic Initiate feat, so we'll grab Guidance, Thaumaturgy to shout out while you're playing plenty of Blitzball, and Shield of Faith. Then when it comes to an actual class, we're going to do a bit of a multi-class, but start off with Fighter. This allows us to choose a fighting style right away, and you want thrown weapon fighting. Wakka's main thing is he throws a Blitzball for dealing damage, and thrown weapon fighting gives you a +2 bonus to the damage rolls you make for thrown weapons. And when it comes to choosing a weapon mastery, and choosing between 3 different weapons, you're basically just going to be focusing on the damage types, because all the different Blitzballs that Wakka uses in Final Fantasy X, some of them have spikes, some of them has razor blades on the outside, some of them are just balls. So grab things that deal piercing, bludgeoning, or slashing damage. Grab a hand axe for throwing something with slashing damage, which gives you the Vex property, which will give you advantage on your next turn. Daggers for the piercing side, which gives you Nick, so you can make an offhand bonus action attack as part of your main attack action. Or a spear for sap. Spears are just a pretty solid thrown weapon. When you can choose another weapon mastery later, grab something like a trident. It kind of fits with the whole swimming nature of Wakka, but at the same time it's a thrown weapon. And when you get one even later, make sure to get some good bludgeoning damage with a light hammer, which also has the neck weapon mastery property. However, when it comes to actually choosing a subclass as a fighter, Wakka's celestial weapon is known as the World Champion. So grab the Champion subclass. It is going to improve your crit range, so you can actually crit on a 19 or 20. It gives you the Remarkable Athlete feature, which I'm not sure how remarkable of an athlete he is, considering his team literally never won a game while he was their captain. But that feature will give you advantage on initiative checks, as well as strength athletics checks. And then on top of that, when you score a crit, you can move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. You'll get an extra attack at 5th level. You can choose an additional fighting style thanks to this subclass. So grab defense. It's probably the only other one that's going to fit for Wakka, giving you a bonus +1 to your armor class. And at 10th level, you get Heroic Warrior. So during combat, you can give yourself a heroic inspiration whenever you start your turn without one. 11th level will give you 2 extra attacks, so you can start getting those attack reels from your overdrive, and you can mix that with the action surge feature that fighters get, getting an entire extra action on their turn. And then at 12th level of fighter, you want to grab the Mark of Making. This is a dragon mark feat that comes from the Auron books. This will give you the mending cantrip, but it also expands your spell list once you get a spell list. And this is important for getting so many of the overdrives that Wakka has access to. So you can get spells like Conjure Barrage or Elemental Weapon. Conjure Barrage is all about those attack reels. Elemental Weapon is all about the element reels. And so right after you get that, make sure to multiclass into Wizard. Getting access to Wizard will give us a whole bunch more spellcasting. Go ahead and take 6 levels in Wizard and grab things like Ice Knife for another elemental attack, Magic Missile to get some rapid fire hits in there. And then you want some of the other base abilities that Wakka has, because we're only sticking to everybody's individual sphere grids. So you can grab like a Sleep Buster attack with the spell Sleep, or a Darkness Buster for blindness, deafness, which can also apply the silence ability. And then make sure to top things off with something like Haste. Since you have to take about 6 levels in Wizard to really make it worth it, you're going to want to choose a Wizard subclass. And I don't want to go too spellcasty because Wakka's not the brightest, so grab something a bit more tanky and defensive by going with a War Magic Wizard. This comes from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and it gives you Arcane Deflection, so when you're hit by an attack or you fail a saving throw, you can use your reaction to gain a +2 bonus to your armor class or a +4 bonus to a saving throw. But when you do this, you can't cast spells or any other cantrips until the end of your next turn. But by bringing it to at least 6th level, you get Power Surge, so you can store magical energy to empower your damaging spells later. But only take it to 6th level, because then you can take 2 more levels in Fighter, because Fighters get more ability score improvements than most other classes, and that'll give you just the right combo to end on an ability score improvement by maxing out at 14th level of Fighter and getting another epic boon. Just grab the boon of Spell Recall because you're not getting a super high level of spell casting, and this will allow you to use your overdrive ability much more often, because it'll give you that free casting that we already covered with Lulu. But there's a big downside to Wakka, and that's that he's using thrown weapons, and there isn't any way for the weapon to come back to you. So he's gonna have to get over his general racism and work alongside the 27th most popular character in all of Final Fantasy, Rikku, which in the world of Spira happens to be a race of people called the Albed. So I wanted something that kind of felt true to what an Albed could be, so I went with a Koravar. These are kind of similar to half-elves, they just don't like being called that, but they do develop their own communities and traditions, and it feels a little more true to being an Albed. Now Rikku does fall into a classic idea in Final Fantasy of being a thief, but she does also fulfill one other major role. So being a thief, we want to take 3 levels in Rogue to start. This will give you expertise in a few skills, so make sure to grab Sleight of Hand so you can steal things better. It'll also give you Sneak Attack, and by taking 3 levels, your Sneak Attack will be an extra 2d6 on an attack. And then at 3rd level of Rogue, you can choose a Rogue subclass, so to really lean into being a thief, we're going to take the Thief subclass. This gives you fast hands, so you can take the Utilize action or take a magic action to use an item that requires an action, and you can pick locks a little easier. But you also get second story work, so you can use your dexterity for calculating jump distance, and you get a climbing speed equal to your normal speed. But after just those 3 levels in Rogue, we need to lean into what she can do best, which is by being an artificer. Because in Final Fantasy, once Rikku joins the party, you can start modifying your items and weapons and armor and everything, but you can only do that once Riku's in your party. And by becoming an artificer, you are super well covered with that, because they get the feature Replicate Magic Item, so they can make your items magical and add effects to them. And most importantly, you can add the effect Returning Weapon. That way, when Wakka throws one of his blitz balls, it comes right back to him. He just has to get over that general racism and prejudice. You can try and find other ways to boost up items, especially by adding elemental effects. And then you want to take the rest of your levels in Artificer, bringing it all the way to level 17. So when you get to choose an Artificer subclass, go with an Alchemist. Riku's overdrive ability is all about mixing together some sort of alchemical reaction. Her overdrive is actually called Alchemy. And Alchemists get an experimental elixir, so they can roll a d6 and see what happens. And when I originally played Final Fantasy X, I didn't really have easy access to a full list of all of our concoctions, so having it be totally random on a D6 feels even more accurate to me when I didn't know what I was mixing together. If you roll a 1, you do a bunch of healing. If you roll a 2, you get swiftness, so whoever takes the concoction, speed is boosted by 10 feet, and that goes up to 15 feet at level 9 of Artificer, and 20 feet at level 15. If you roll a 3, you get resilience, boosting up some armor class. Rolling a 4 gives you a plus 1d4 to every attack roll and saving throw they make. Rolling a 5 gives flying speed, and rolling a 6 on your d6 allows you to choose whatever random concoction you want. 5th level of being an alchemist allows you to boost up the healing you do, but also boost up the damage with acid, fire, or poison damage. 9th level boosts up your spell Lesser Restoration, and 15th level of being an alchemist gives you Chemical Mastery. So when you cast an artificer spell that deals acid, fire, or poison damage, you can also deal 2d8 force damage on top of it. You gain resistance to acid and poison damage, and you gain immunity to the poison condition, which is an absolutely brutal condition to get in Final Fantasy X. And you get Conjured Cauldron, so you can cast Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron without expending a spell slot. But once you hit 20th level overall, which means you get to choose an epic boon, so I would grab the boon of Poison Mastery. This gives you immunity to poison damage, but it also allows you to max out any poison damage you deal. Then when it comes to actual spells, make sure you have a good mixture of concoctions, with things like Tasha's Caustic Brew, Cure Wounds to heal people, Heat Metal to damage constructs even more, Fabricate to build things better, Summon Construct to summon your own Machina to help you in battle, which might actually lean into Final Fantasy X-2 even more, because her ultimate ability there was basically summoning a giant construct for her to ride. And you don't really get an airship until you make friends with some of the Albed too, so also grab the spell Create Spelljamming Helm. There's a bunch of others I would grab, but they'll all be on the character sheets that I'm going to be throwing up on Patreon anyways. Next up, you got the absolute coolest character in the game. And now that I look back, turns out I'm actually older than he was. And considering this game is officially a quarter century old, that just makes me feel that much older now. Because the 15th most popular character in all of Final Fantasy is Auron. Now here's where we might get to a tiny bit of spoilers. So if you haven't played, there might be a tiny spoiler here. Because for a species, when it comes to Auron, we're going to choose a Reborn. Because he's actually dead throughout the entirety of the game. Reborn got updated with the newer Ravenloft book, and it gives you a feature like Escaped Death, so you have advantage on death saving throws. You have the feature Everlasting, so you don't gain exhaustion levels from dehydration, malnutrition, or suffocation. You get Strange Endurance, so you can choose a resistance type to either cold, necrotic, or poison. And you get the feature Knowledge from a Past Life, giving you another skill. And when you fail an ability check, you can roll a d6 and add it to the d20 you rolled. When it comes to a background, Auron did originally follow on someone else's pilgrimage, Lord Braska, which is Yuna's father. So I wanted something other than just guard. We're gonna go with Lord's Alliance Vassal. This gives you the feat Lord's Alliance Agent, which gives you 2 features. Inspiring Strike, so when you score a crit, you can choose an ally within 30 feet of yourself who doesn't have Heroic Inspiration and give them Heroic Inspiration. And then the other feature is Reassert Honor. So when an enemy you can see deals damage to an ally of yours within 5 feet of you, you have advantage on your next attack roll against them before the end of your next turn. Then we're going to do a bit of a multi-class, because there's actually 3 classes I could see Auron using, but only 2 of them really make sense. Because there was a slight inkling for me to go with a tiny bit of Barbarian, because there's a couple times in his first life that he got really angry and charged in, but those were in super extreme circumstances, so it's not like he was actually angry all the time. So I won't go with any Barbarian, but he does very heavily lean into the ways of the samurai, because even his overdrive is called Bushido. So start off with 3 levels in Fighter. This will give you a fighting style right away, so grab Great Weapon Fighting, because he's all about having a massive sword that he wields all the time, and when he really gets serious, he takes his other arm out. But then you can grab Weapon Mastery with a great sword, which is all you really want. It's a solid damaging weapon, and just generally pretty awesome and badass, because it's Auron, that's just kind of his thing. But when you get to choose a fighter subclass, go with Samurai. It comes from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It'll give you a bonus skill proficiency, which we're going to go with Insight, because he's one of the more insightful members of the party, and it gives you Fighting Spirit. So as a bonus action on your turn, you can give yourself advantage on weapon attack rolls until the end of your current turn. When you do so, you gain 5 temp HP, but you can only use this feature 3 times per long rest. And then right after that 3rd level, go ahead and multi-class, because at this point, you pretty much make an oath to Lord Braska and a new oath to Yuna. So we're going to be multi-classing into Paladin. And this works super well for all of the overdrives that Auron has, because basically all of his overdrives are essentially smites. So running through the features really quick, he gets another fighting style by multi-classing into Paladin. So we're going to actually take the interception fighting style. This allows you to reduce damage going at one of your allies while only wielding a weapon. And this is perfect because Auron is one of the first people to be able to stand in front of an ally to take damage for them. And this really feels like the interception fighting style. So it's perfect to align with his abilities on his sphere grid. Paladins also get Paladin Smite, so you can use your overdrive to just smash down on enemies even stronger. And one thing that definitely encapsulates who Auron is that he's a very devoted Guardian. So we're going to take the Paladin subclass, Oath of Devotion. This will give you additional spells like Protection from Good and Evil, Shield of Faith, or you can get his overdrive where he slams his sword into the ground, damaging a whole bunch of people with the spell Flame Strike if you get all the way to 17th level of Paladin. And you can even have that ability to drink from your jug and spit it out on your weapon, making it more powerful and almost making it sacred, because a Devotion Paladin gets the feature Sacred Weapon, allowing you to add your Charisma modifier to attack rolls you make with the weapon, and each time you hit with it, you can deal normal damage or radiant damage. And you can make that weapon even more sacred with the spell Divine Favor, giving it an extra plus 1d4 to any damage it deals. But outside of that, grab every possible smite because they fit the overdrive so damn well, with Thunderous Smite, Wrathful Smite, Shining Smite, and especially Banishing Smite to just knock that enemy away. But you also want a few others that just generally boost you up, like Spirit Shroud boosts your damage overall, Death Ward just feels accurate for somebody like Auron, and Destructive Wave is just kind of fitting. You'll get plenty of other Auron style abilities as you level up, like having an aura that helps boost up your party, and Auron is all about having some solid aura, or Smite of Protection, so when you cast Divine Smite, you and your allies have half cover while in your aura of protection. But there's 2 major things you want to grab along the way. The first is going to be the feat Great Weapon Master. You very iconically wield a big-ass sword, so make sure that that weapon deals as much damage as possible by adding your proficiency bonus to every time you deal damage. And because you're kind of the default tank taking damage for your allies occasionally, grab the epic boon, the Boon of Fortitude, once you hit 16th level of Paladin. This will increase your hit point maximum by 40 points, and whenever you get healed, you get to add your Constitution modifier. Then you get to move right along to the 7th most popular character in all of Final Fantasy, and I will continue to call him Tidus. I know it's Tidus, but it just doesn't feel right, especially because they never said his name in the original game, even if they said it in plenty of the other spin-off games and stuff. Although I have to call out that there is one random time that they did call him Tidus in a spin-off game, but pretty much every other time he's referred to as Tidus. But that's the end. I'm going to talk about that. For building Tidus, there is another slight spoiler if you have not played the game. When you get to choose his species, he is not human. He is actually a dream of the faith. So we're going to choose the species Kalashtar. They're actually a species in D&D that come from the union of humanity and renegade spirits from the plane of dreams. By choosing this species, you gain resistance to psychic damage, you have advantage on wisdom and charisma saves, and you can't be the target of the dream spell. But also, whenever you finish a long rest, you can choose proficiency in one skill. But since the dream you came from, you were an all-star blitzball player, we're going to grab proficiency in athletics. But when you were a blitzball player, you were definitely a bit of a showboat. So grab the background entertainer. And then when it comes to actually choosing a class, that part can be tricky, but we need to lean into his main ability that he has before anything else. And that's the ability Cheer, allowing you to cheer on your party and boost their stats. So we're going to dive into the class Bard, because they get Bardic Inspiration, so they can cheer on their party and boost up their allies by giving them an extra d6 they can roll. and that D6 is going to upgrade to a D8 at level 5, a D10 at level 10, and a D12 at level 15. They get a bunch of spell casting throughout, but you can't really use a ton of good spells until you at least get magical secrets, which is a feature that bards get, allowing them to dip into other spell lists whenever they want to. And the majority of spells that Tidus casts are going to be time-related spells, like haste or slow. Bards by default can get slow, but they can't get haste without magical secrets. There's only one other spell you really want to grab, which is essentially the slice and dice overdrive that he has, and that's Steel Wind Strike. It's another one you have to wait until you get magical secrets for, but it allows you to choose up to 5 creatures you can see within range and make a melee spell attack against each creature, dealing 6d10 force damage. There's going to be a few other spells you might want to grab to maybe get your Blitz Ace overdrive or Spiral Cut, but Slice and Dice was the hardest one, and Steel Wind Strike should have you covered there. Then once you hit 3rd level of Bard, you can choose a Bard subclass, so go with a Valor Bard. This will give you access to long swords, which you really needed as Tidus, but it'll also give you access to shields, and considering he has a buckler he straps to his arm, that's pretty perfect. It'll give you the feature Combat Inspiration, so Bardic Inspiration can be used to help boost your defense or your offense, and at 6th level of Bard, you get extra attack, so when you make the attack action on your turn, you can attack twice, and you can replace one of those attacks with a cantrip, so make sure to grab True Strike. That way you can do a bit more damage. 14th level of being a Valor Bard will give you Battle Magic, so you can cast a normal leveled spell as an action, but still attack with your weapon as a bonus action. But Tidus is one of the fastest characters in the game. So for an epic boon, when you get 19th level, grab the Boon of Speed. This will boost your speed by 30 feet. And as a bonus action, you can take the disengage action, which also ends the grappled condition on you. And considering in my head, the second that I use the escape function in Final Fantasy X, I can always remember Tidus saying live and let live over and over again. That feels especially fitting for that escape artist feature. Then we get to the second most popular character in all of Final Fantasy, only being beaten by Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, and that's Yuna. Now, I mentioned that this game changed my life, and I mean that in so many ways because it is my favorite game. But it had such a major impact that I'm not saying this actually altered my perception of people, but I'm definitely a bit older. I'm a grown-up, and I have a daughter who found my Switch copy of Final Fantasy X and looked at the cover and thought that Yuna was her mom. So I can neither confirm or deny that this game had such an effect on me that it may have actually had an effect on who I decided to wind up spending my life with. But when it comes to the actual build, for building Yuna, that's a little complicated. Because for a species, we're going human, but when we get to choose a feat for being a human, grab Magic Initiate and dive into the Cleric spell list. This will give us Guidance and Sacred Flame for cantrips, but it also gives us Cure Wounds. And then for a background, because you come from Lord Braska, I found a background that sounds remotely close, kind of, maybe, but it's called the House Jurasco heir instead of Braska, Jurasco. It works in my head. This will give us the Mark of Healing feat, really adding into our healing stuff. It gives us the Cure Wounds spell to have prepared, so you don't actually need it from Magic Initiate. I'll swap that out later on the character sheet, but it also boosts up your spell list when you get a spell list. So you get access to Healing Word, False Life, Prayer of Healing, Aura of Vitality, Mass Healing Word, Aura of Life, Aura of Purity, and Greater Restoration. And you may be thinking, why would you bother doing that? She's obviously a cleric. Well, here's the thing. She is a cleric early in the games. I will not deny that. But once she realizes the truth behind the Church of Yevon, she is not about that life anymore. She wants to go the actual way of truth and find real knowledge while finding a new way to defeat sin. And most notably, she is still a summoner. So we're going with the best summoner you can be in D&D, and that's by going with a wizard who specializes in the School of Conjuration. This is going to get an update soon in D&D, but we can still use the original one from the Player's Handbook in the original 5th edition, which still meshes nicely with the updates from 2024. So we have all the healing spells we need from our background and our species-related origin feat, but we get all of the best summoning from our class, because wizards get some awesome summoning, but being a conjuration wizard just makes it better. So for the actual summoning stuff, grab Find Familiar, which is the most basic thing you're going to have, but also grab Summon Fae, Summon Shadow Spawn. Summon Shadow Spawn's perfect for anima, by the way, but you can also just as easily use Summon Undead. Then Summon Elemental for so many of the elemental summons you get throughout Final Fantasy. Summon Draconic Spirit for Bahamut, or however you pronounce it. And you can also grab Summon Fiend as well. And this covers pretty much every summon you would have in Final Fantasy X. Summon Fae will cover the Magus Sisters. Summon Elemental covers all the elemental stuff, and Draconic Spirit will cover your big dragon you can summon. But the one that's a little bit lacking is probably Yojimbo, but you could probably argue that would go with Summon Undead because he was a fallen samurai. The only other spells you really want to make sure you grab is Absorb Elements for the null elemental spell that you can get in Final Fantasy X, and Dispel Magic for the Dispel ability. But Conjuration Wizards are so good as summoners because they get things like Benign Transposition, so you can swap places with your summon when you need to. This means that they'll be in battle and keeping you in safety, which is very accurate for the combat in Final Fantasy X. You also get Focused Conjuration, so while you're concentrating on a conjuration spell, your concentration can't be broken from taking damage. That means that you don't lose concentration on your summon. They stay out as long as you want them to. And they're a little more sturdy because they get the feature Durable Summons. So any creature that you summon or create with a conjuration spell has an extra 30 temp HP. But to make sure you get a bit more healing, grab the epic boon, the Boon of the Bright Sun. So as a bonus action, you create an emanation of light around you, and any creature that starts its turn within this light gains 10 temp HP, at least if they're your ally. And that's how I would build the entire party from Final Fantasy X in Dungeons & Dragons. I can't believe this game has been out for 25 years at this point, and I absolutely love every bit of this game. I replay it pretty consistently, and every once in a while I will watch somebody else react to the ending and possibly cry along with them. But I would love to know anybody else's favorite moment or even favorite character from Final Fantasy X, because I will find any excuse to talk about this game. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping to roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want your campaign set in the world of Spira to fight against sin and sin spawn by playing as the characters from Final Fantasy X in D&D.